Okay, get this situated. Oh boy. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are
I
you?
am
Happy
doing
Monday.
well. I have had a productive day so far.
Yeah,
Good,
same. Same. Yeah, I've had a good
good.
productive day, which is
Yeah,
even better.
I like it. I like it. Maybe we can transfer some of this positive energy over.
I hope so. I am really I'm looking forward to talking about this because there's just so
Isn't it
much,
mostly
right?
just going to be us complaining?
No, we're keeping this positive,
I
Austin.
mean, yeah,
We do that behind the
you
scenes.
know, we'll try not to. We'll try not to turn it into us complaining.
No,
Okay,
definitely not.
let's see
So where do you want to
what's
start
our
with
time here.
this?
We're right on time. Cool. So, how many do we have on? All right, yeah, we're getting some people on. Cool. I was thinking that, well, first off, we can kind of introduce the topic a little bit. So, um, for those of you that maybe didn't see our the post that we put up, and our post was kind of vague anyhow. So we want to cover areas that we see as coaches, in the trenches as coaches, that we're seeing people fall short on in terms of their functional health goals. So we're not talking protocols probably here so much. We're talking like, once we have the education of, what are the problems, these are things we're figuring out initially when we're intaking a client. What is the problem? What are the shortcomings of the client? How do we meet in the middle with this client? So once we've kind of established all of this, what things do people tend to fall short on their end? And that's kind of what we want to dive into. So I have a way that I think I can kind of kick this off, and that and I know I do this, and I'm sure you do this, you have your own version of this, but when you're actually bringing the client in, what are these things that you're looking for right off the bat? Because there's like some characteristics and some personality traits and some different things that we see reoccur so much that we're probably looking for them right when they come in. So maybe what are some of these, I don't want to call them red flags because I don't think that's really the right term, but what are some of these things these shortcomings that you see um, right off the bat?
I think, well, we're very much the same. So I look for the history. I look for the history of the client, um, and how they communicate that history, how the client communicates in general, because you can tell a lot through dialogue. I know for myself, I do Zoom consults right out of the gate just to make sure that there is no misinterpretation of information. But you can typically tell somebody's history on, number one, the list of events that they have laid out before them, whether it's challenge after struggle, and then how they're communicating that is pretty indicative of how they responded to that. And it's really interesting because for some people, what you'll read their history and you're like, holy shit, like that is so intense. And they're just like, yeah, no big deal. Like, just it's like numb. And it's almost like they don't even realize what they have been through or what has transpired. But then on the polar opposite, you'll also have someone where it's like all the things and looking for like every little nitpick thing that's going wrong or things like that. So I think like that is a big thing that I look for, is their timeline of history, symptoms of why they're coming to me, how they relate that timeline and how they're responding to it. And then I actually ask questions, I think you do too, but I ask questions about their support system. I ask questions about what are things that they think are preventing them from achieving their goals. I ask, what have they worked with other coaches, what worked and what didn't. And that's a very vague question, because I'll have some clients that will dig into like, low carb, high fat, and then I'll have other clients talk to me about the actual coaching. And that in itself, how a client is answering the question, tells me a lot.
So you kind of took the words out of my mouth, and that so we're asking questions, but we're wanting we want the answer to the question, but also what we want to see is the perception of that question by the person. So for example, when you ask a question about stress or about past experiences or whatever, you could take two people that have similar experiences, which if you look at the timeline for like probably the majority of our people, there's going to be of course nuance, but there's going to be like a lot of similarities in their journeys, but you might get a totally different perception of that journey from person to person. So that can tell you how they are handling each situation they're presented with. That makes a big difference. If we have two people that, even if we took the same person and we put them through the same dieting history, the same maybe trauma history, the same whatever, through like a course of 5 years or 10 years, if they both responded to those traumas differently, you would have a vastly different outcome even in the same person, or you'd have a vastly different problem at the end of it, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's super important, and I'm glad that you kind of pointed it out that way.
I think it helps us to, and you know what, let's be real, Austin, what we're really talking here about is about communication. Like, and this is, I think anyone can relate, whether this is a client coach relationship or just a relationship with somebody else, is it comes down to having open dialogue and being receptive to that open dialogue and even interpretation. I have had, instances with clients where I've had to say, hey, this is how I'm interpreting what you're saying. Is this correct? And I really want to make sure that my interpretation is appropriate. And I like to open up that dialogue, because one of two things happens. Either one, they're like, yeah, that's like bang on. Or they're like, oh no, I didn't mean that at all, which that helps me as their coach steer the trajectory of what we should do or maybe shouldn't do.
Yeah. So that kind of leads us into our initial approach with the client. That's kind of how as coaches, we're kind of trying to figure out like, what kind of approach do we need to use with this client? A soft approach, a hard approach, somewhere in between. What is it? So, so I like this using this example of like having the same person with a different problem, because we can kind of see like how we might address the same problem differently in different people. That's why this type of thing is so much more than a protocol. It's so much more than, it's so much more than even understanding what the problem is, right? So now that we've maybe established the, what the communication style is and what their perception to their stress is, and so on and so forth, we can kind of figure out, okay, either A, this client's pretty receptive. I've gotten people where on paper their issues look really, really bad, but they were generally pretty easy to work with. They had a lot of stuff going on. They had a lot of moving parts, but they were able to just kind of let go and let me, work on it and give me objective feedback and all of these things. But you may, on the flip side of that, have somebody that has, something that's probably far more minor than they are perceiving it as, and they end up having a really difficult time because their communication style and perception of that issue is whatever it might be, abrasive.
Yeah, and I think it's even, and maybe I'm not wording this correctly, but like I think too sometimes it's the perception of where we are actually at in that mindset, because we can be either in a place of that victim mindset, and just being very fear-based, And that's a really tough place to coach somebody out of, but that is where coaching shines if you let us. And it's like kind of like two sides of a ladder, right? Like you have a ladder, and then you have the bottom where you're feeling like shit, but you're also mindset maybe not in a great place. You're in a negative mindset. You're in a comparison mindset, victim mode, not feeling worthy, focused on negative self-talk. And then you have the top of the ladder, which is where you really want to be. And that's where you feel success. That's where you feel capable. That's where you feel supported. And I feel like a lot of people can kind of wallow in that place of a victim mindset because they just of fear. They can't get past that fear of what it takes to maybe vision themselves where they really
100%.
Want to be.
And that's kind of default response for a human being, I think. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like, we've all done it. It's just a matter of, I think it's a matter of how long you stay in that place. It's not a matter of if it happens, because if you're presented with an obstacle of any magnitude, you're going to probably do a pros and cons list in your head, and you're probably going to go mostly cons at first, right?
Yeah.
So 100%, that's very true. So I think that this kind of brings us into one of the things, and probably the biggest thing that you and I discussed that probably limits people, is self-awareness, right? Is this awareness of where they're even at, because we can see it, maybe they can't see it, right? I would say a lot of the time they can't see it because they're and there's reasons for that. One, because you've been in a certain place for so long. Like me, for example, if I had some habitual thing going on that I was maybe struggling with, it would perhaps be easier for someone like you or somebody else to see it, maybe from an outside perspective, because I've been doing it so much. Right. So
I think it's easier for us to see. I think it's easier for us to see outsider looking in, and that's really what we are as coaches. I think it's easier for us to see where people are kicking their own feet out from underneath them. They're kicking their feet out before they're even allowing themselves to, try to stand up. And here again, maybe that is because they haven't. I mean, it's two things. It could be that they haven't fallen enough, or maybe like that pain isn't bad enough to keep going. But then I do see also there is that identity. There is that victim where they identify with being in that victim mindset and almost perpetually not wanting really to come out of that.
Or they identify with either the victim mindset, or they identify with whatever their pain is, or whatever their image is. Like, image is a big thing too now, especially because we have social media, and we have, and we work with a lot of the people we work with also maybe have their own fitness venture, right, of some kind, right? Whether it's competing, or whether it's like their coaches, or whatever, anything really. So, I've had this more than once, but I literally had someone tell me verbatim one time that the reason that I'll preface this. So we had kind of gone through all these steps, and they had built this self-awareness, and they knew what they needed to do, like all of these things. I'm like, well, I was a little lost. I was almost a little lost at that point, what was missing and why we weren't connecting. And they told me that they were afraid to execute these things, in their case, backing off training, doing these things we generally have to do, because it would ruin their image on social media and they would lose business.
Oh my God, no way. If anything, to me, like, if you're showing up as your authentic self, let's be real. Like, we don't need, if your motivation in life is truly income based, that's going to be limited. But like, if you really walk authentically in your authentic self, like, I think if anything, people will resonate more with you, because
she actually had enough self-awareness to say it, But do you know how many people probably feel that, right? They feel it.
Oh,
They might not fully recognize it. Like you and I can see it. They're afraid to, because they have a certain following or a certain image, or they're a competitor, so they're afraid to lose that identity or whatever. So she was actually, you know, aware enough to literally tell me that. So I talked to her and I said, hey,
cool.
let me flip this on you and let me tell you that maybe you're doing a disservice to your clients by portraying something that's not correct or real or
Realistic.
realistic or
Yeah,
sustainable, et
exactly.
cetera, et cetera. So she actually now, um, not a client anymore, doing a lot better from what I understand. But most of her content is kind of like very transparent and in line with kind of like what you and I
Yeah.
talk about, and it's working. So, transparency is
Yeah.
never transparency might attract a different type of business, but it's definitely not going to hurt your business.
No, I think I can speak for the both of us. I think that it needs to come from an authentic place, because here again, like, we also see the folks that get on social media and they
Right.
are the victims and it comes from this victim mentality. And for me, for example, whenever I come and I want to share maybe something that is my story, I want to make sure that not necessarily it's like solution based, but there is some like kind of lesson, and it's not coming from, oh, woe is me
Right.
place. But if there's a lesson there, there's something that maybe somebody can resonate with, and like, oh, well, she's working on this as well. And hey, things aren't always, sunshine and roses and pixie sticks. People aren't always, waking up perfect, every day and feeling awesome. Some days people just
Right.
don't feel
Yeah,
as good.
100%. And that's so, and that's kind of like a sidebar on healing. I had that discussion with someone today. One of my male clients, he's doing really good. I'm super happy for him. But then he'll occasionally have a bad day in there and get hyper focused on the bad day. When I'm like, oh, no, 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 it's normal to have a bad day once in a while, and we all do. You're not going to be perfect. That's kind of a side topic, but to go along with self-awareness is ownership. So like, this is another one that you and I have talked about. There sometimes needs to be that discussion of, like, do you really want to get better? Like, is this a priority? Like, are
Yes.
you tired of feeling this way? Are you willing to give up what's making you feel this way, whatever that might be, whether it be an activity that they're doing or a lifestyle habit or a mindset or whatever. Basically it's like
Yeah.
you're basically in a meeting with an addict that won't give up
100%.
what's making them sick, even though someone is a professional is telling them this is what's making you sick, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's having that discussion. I think you've said it before too. Um, Building that relationship, that rapport, that trust. And number one, I would hope that when you hire a coach, that you trust them. You should. I'm assuming so. Like, that would be what I would do if I hire a coach. I want to make sure that I trust that person. I'm willing to, give my all to them, and that they are not going to lead me down, a bad path. And sometimes that may be, having that conversation of, when you mentioned like training, if somebody is used to training 7 days a week, that we're not pulling it down to zero right then and there. Maybe that's just backing it off by a couple of days. But like you said, it's taking ownership of what they really want and what needs to happen to get that. And clearly, even though you are comfortable doing what you're doing and you've come to us to being comfortable, you're not comfortable doing that, or you wouldn't have hired us
Right.
to get things in
Right. So
alignment.
at what point do we have this discussion? And I'm curious to see if your answer is similar to mine, but um, is this discussion of, and this is going to kind of be a it depends thing. Is this discussion of ownership an initial conversation with the client, or is it something like that we have after nothing else is working? You know what I mean?
I'm
Yeah.
going to say both. I'm going to say both. If someone's coming to me and there's a lot going on, here again, where are they at? Like if they have all these functional issues and we aren't even eating consistently through the day, well, then I'm going to have to, as a coach, it's my job to communicate to them effectively the steps that we need to do to get them ready for any functional quote protocols or anything that may be needed. That being said, if it is even needed by the time we get there, if we start doing all the things along that road. The other piece of that is readdressing that and revisiting that when people get uncomfortable or life gets busy, because everybody's can be focused and things are great, they're on their routine, but then sometimes life just comes and like kicks you in the crotch, and it kind of keeps kicking you over and over and over again. And that, for some people, when that overwhelm kicks in, that's when they need to be reminded, hey, listen, this isn't where you need to necessarily throw your hands up and say, I'm going to quit on myself, I'm going to give up, eating consistently and drinking, water and all the things. But maybe this is a time that maybe we need to scale the intervention differently and renegotiate our trajectory so we can keep going forward just where you're at right now.
Yeah, so I can give two kind of examples of a new client intake, and there's going to be variances to this, but let's say one person comes in, they have 6 different issues going on, but they kind of have a lot of gaps in their lifestyle, a lot of low-hanging fruit, like we like to call it. There may be a gen pop, they don't have a lot of fitness history, whatever. I'm probably not going to go too hard on that person initially with that ownership conversation, because ownership might not really be the issue with that person. It may just be that their habits suck, right? And let's see what we can get accomplished, and then I'll kind of ease into that as we go. On the flip side of that, and I probably get a little more of these than you, but a lot of like the competitors, right, that are also functional. Yeah. And that's a conversation I have to have up front with a lot of people, because they're the ones that are already tracking every variable known to man. They're the ones that are already doing all of these habits, or they think they're doing, they have all the habits nailed, right? But really what they're doing is driving themselves into a neurotic tizzy, and they're, losing their minds. So that might be a whole different initial conversation. I might skip the soft step and just go right to the, hey, like, it's obvious that XYZ is the problem, and I can help you fix XYZ, but I'm just letting you know right now that you're gonna have to let go, be willing to let go of some things. Like I need this verbal communication. Do we need to write this down and sign it? You know what I mean? But
actually that works. Like that works. I have had to do that, where with a client where I needed them to write it down, not for me. I needed them to write it down. And like, I need you to say it.
Right.
I can say it. I'm over here like saying it, but like I need you to say it. I need you to take the ownership of that, because it's one thing if I'm telling you, hey, we need to back off of this. Like, we are going to back off of this, and then the client continues to do that. Like, I literally can only say so much. I cannot make you do it.
Right.
You have to commit to yourself. And if you tell me that you're continuing going to the gym and you continue to feel like shit, and I've asked you to pull that out,
yeah, it's like I need
at?
some kind of confirmation. If I send that to you in an email or update, I need a, do you agree? Yes, I agree. I'm going to screenshot it and I'm going to save it, like something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it sounds silly, but in all reality, that's maybe that kind of accountability is part of our coaching process in that case. I mean, yeah, accountability is obviously part of the coaching process, but it's going to be a larger factor for some people than others. But some people need that extreme self-accountability, and that's, because they otherwise aren't going to do it. There's always justification. We can always justify it somehow, right? And generally what
Oh yeah.
happens is it's the way that that process generally transpires is they'll do everything except that thing that they need to fix. So they'll
Yes.
track they'll track every variable that in their mind they've justified that tracking this is going to help me, doing this is going to help me, doing this is going to help me. But they're kind of like running all the way around this one obvious thing that they're afraid of doing. And a lot of the time, it is doing less of something. A lot of the time, so they'll,
Most.
so they do. It's
Most of the
always ironic because they'll, like stress obviously being a huge driver. They'll do all of the tracking and the biofeedback tracking and all these things to track the stress. They'll do the things like, and I even get down to things like people doing extra parasympathetic activities, meditation, journaling and stuff, and they're stressing themselves out doing that, right? Because they're like us, right?
I
They're
was
like,
just gonna say, like, I'm like, there's a line where people are like, I
I'm like,
meditate
no,
this many times, I do
stop.
grounding, I do cold water showers, hot water showers, and
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
like,
like,
holy
it,
shit.
and I said, no, you're literally putting as many band-aids on this damn wound as you possibly can, and the shit's just bleeding through, and it's funny because I had a conversation with a client. I actually sent this to her probably a couple weeks ago, and so her self-awareness was becoming really good, and she was doing better at letting things roll off her shoulders and this and that. But she was in that stage where she had to really, really think about it, right? She had to like keep assigning. I said, the real magic happens when it's just automatic and you don't have to meditate, right? And you don't have
Yeah.
to journal. I'm not saying those things are bad. If they work for you and you like them, that's fine. But there's a real beauty in having these habits like ingrained in your thought process and in your natural reactivity, so you don't have to do extra assigned activities to make them work. It just happens, right?
Yeah. It's that, I think like you really nailed it there. It's that reactivity to life. And I think that for the majority of people are very reactive. And I always like to kind of say, I really work hard at being a thermostat as opposed to a thermometer. Controlling, staying calm. I'm controlling the temperature of my reaction. And having, again, it just comes back to our topic, the self-awareness. And I think if people would just take sometimes just a one moment to think prior to that initial reaction, I think that their reaction would be a lot calmer. I think that they would feel a lot more in control of the situation and of the subsequent situations
and
that will, allow
and
them to.
what you start to realize is it's not that complicated. That's what
No.
once you start kind of you really just let those things go and you start easing into that process, you realize, oh, it's really not that complicated, you know you
It,
yeah, I
it
mean,
doesn't have to be
yes,
complicated.
some of the probably, if you're listening and you're doing the things that we're asking of you and etc., your part's not complicated at all. it I mean, the most complicated part
Yeah.
is our like interpreting blood work and testing. I mean, understanding those things, which we don't need you to really fully understand. We can talk to you about it, of course, but your part as a client is rather simple because you already, you know, you already have a routine in your day. Chances are a lot of people, even if their routine's bad, it's still a routine. They're still kind of doing the same things every day, even if they're maybe not the right things. So now we're just shifting to doing the right things within the same number of hours in the day. So it's
Yeah.
it's like I don't know if you've ever seen I don't know if it's a quote, meme, whatever, where they said, um, it's like being in shape is hard, but being fat is also hard. Like choose your hard.
Yeah.
Well, it's like kind of the
Yeah.
same thing. It's like, well,
Yeah.
having good habits could potentially be difficult for you at first, but so is feeling like shit all the time and mentally being a wreck,
Hmm.
So kind of
Yeah.
pick your effort, like you're gonna put your effort somewhere.
Yeah. I think that what's hard with many clients, and this is where I kind of want to come from a client perspective, is for many of our clients, they
Yeah.
have been through quite a lot. And they maybe have been doing all the things. And sometimes by the time they do get to us, they are just
Yeah.
freaking exhausted mentally, mentally thinking. And I think that, to them, it's, I would never want them to say, stop advocating for yourself. It's more so like those hyper vigilant, we can never, um, we can never do a little bit less. We can never really do an audit for your day. That I start to worry. Like I've had clients where I would say, I need you to write down everything that you need to get done in a day. Is that actually humanly possible? And if we could really kind of structure that list, I really think it would be so beneficial to you, especially when we're working with
Yeah.
stress management.
Yeah. And they probably find there's a lot of wasted resources in there too that they could probably get rid of. Um, yeah, taking inventory, right? You know, that's
Yeah.
that.
Doing a huge audit, I think is, I mean, I know for me personally, I
Sure.
have to do it all the time. Like there's so many things that I want to do, want to learn, and be better at, and obviously coach my clients in the best way, but there is literally only so many hours in a day, and I can't do all the things every single day, but I absolutely have to have my list of non-negotiables for myself, as well as non-negotiables for my work. Like, and those are non-negotiables, and those have to happen. And then I can start planning in things outside of that. And then I also need to understand, having that self-awareness, that I'm going to have a cap at what I can actually take on mentally, in my day and in my week. And that's where that audit's so important. Like, do you really need 2 hours to do said activity, or are you being inefficient in some way, and maybe that's causing you extra stress in your day? So just kind of doing that as well is
Yeah,
really
for sure.
helpful.
And that's not even taking into consideration like doing your dishes and taking out your trash and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like other stuff.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, being a
so
human.
it's you, again, we really have to figure out like how we're allocating those precious resources that we have. And the the cool thing, if we're talking be a little more positive, we're not being negative, but we can be a little more positive. Is
Yeah.
that once you start feeling better, you're able to do more, right? So it's always fun to see.
Yeah.
It's always great for when I get to see um, those glimpses. It really, for most people, you need, I would say, 50% improvement in one third to half improvement in how you feel before I get full buy-in. So and what I say mean by that is if I just have like a good week, that's a little bit better than last week. Yeah, they're generally positive about it when they're reporting and stuff, but you could easily fall right back. But when we start stringing them
Yeah.
together, we start getting 2 weeks, three
Oh
weeks,
yeah.
4 weeks, or that are more good than they are bad. Then it gets a lot easier to start letting go of things because they're like, oh, this is nice, right? I like this. So I really don't want to go back to that. But until you have kind of gotten over that hump, as you will, then it's difficult. It's difficult to form those habits. So, they say every habit takes, so long to form, right? It's no different. It's the
Yeah.
same. It's the same thing when we're talking about healing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like that diet paradigm where they talk about, when you've been in a diet, you then need to stay out of diet for like double that time to regain, homeostasis again. Kind of same thing when it comes to habits. Like, it's going to take, if you've been doing something for years, or thinking a certain way, or maybe not really taking self-responsibility, which is really hard. And I'm definitely not going at that from like a negative place. And I'm not saying like, oh, you blame, like let's not do that. We're not doing the blame game. No one's saying, you did this intentionally to yourself. But I think sometimes taking that ownership and self-responsibility for where you're at and that history thereof, and more so, what can you do going forward? I think that's like such a positive thing, and that's so powerful. Like all the cards are like in your basket. You get to choose how you're going to go forward, but you actively have to
Yeah,
choose that.
and I feel like a lot of the time people don't know that they do have the option of feeling better. So
Yeah.
they need somebody, like you or myself or whoever it might be to actually show them, hey, this is a possibility for you to feel better, or for you to function better, or for you to meet X, whatever goal you have. So
Yeah.
You have to get over that hump of hopelessness, and that victim mentality. So that it's the victim mentality generally, I generally kind of see it lump into two different categories, where you have one crowd that's it's very much like hopelessness, right? You have the other crowd that it's not hopelessness. They're just not acknowledged. They're just, out of sight, out of mind, right? Just stay in the pain
Yeah.
all the time, right? And as long as they're over there, scraping what teeny little dopamine they can to continue. So, each
Yeah.
each population's a little bit different, but I definitely find that sometimes, like being relatable helps people. Like I like to use examples. I use myself all the time as an example, because
Yeah.
I'm just like,
I was gonna say, between us,
I
I
don't
think
have
that
any
we could
shame.
maybe
There's no shame. I'm just like, hey, listen, I'm just gonna let you know. And another thing that I actually say this to, it's funny because I say this to a lot of my mentorship coaches. We always have to remember as a coach that our perception of a problem is going to be much different than someone else's, because they might stub their toe for the first time, and that's a big deal. But if you've stubbed your toe 75 million times already, it's still going to suck, but it's going to be less of a big deal. So like us looking at
Yeah.
lab work, or us looking at a problem, we're like, yeah, I've done 7 of these this morning already. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so to the client, like sometimes even that is helpful to the client, when I let them know, like, hey, guess what? This is pretty common. This is a very common thing, because most
Yeah.
people generally fall within this range of common issues, right? With their own
Yeah.
nuance. So if I can, that's another tool that we can use, another thing that kind of helps, why this is very common. I have 30 other people dealing with this or whatever. So that's, there's a lot of ways that we can try to make the issue relatable to people, to get them out of that victim mindset, to get them out of that hopelessness mindset, and start actually seeing that there are options to get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
you mentioned one other thing that I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit that I think is important, and this this would be this would probably be for the type of person that has worked with other coaches, or they've tried or researched on their own, or whatever it may be. The idea of like the protocol burnout and the burnout client. So this is a different type of client that maybe they might not have awareness. Those burnout clients don't necessarily have much self-awareness either, but they do have, these people generally have a more knowledge of, or at least they think they have more knowledge of
For the good, yeah.
their situation. So if you could you well, first off, just kind of explain what a protocol burnout even is.
Yeah. So there's like two kind of things that you were talking about there, which is one, client who's done protocol after protocol after protocol, and you almost hear the disordered thinking already starting. It's like analysis paralysis. They're looking for perhaps the thing that is going to fix
It's always the
them
thing,
because
the
they are
one
broken.
thing. And maybe you have the thing, but if you
One
don't,
thing.
we'll fire you and they'll hire me because I probably have the thing. And then they'll come back.
And I'll get them back. By the way, clients will say, like, we know. So we have that. And then, like you mentioned about the client who's done all the research and looking at all the research bases and, you know, all the people posting on Instagram, well, they're doing this with this client. And so they all of a sudden are pretty much trying to coach themselves, but they've hired you, and you're like, you have to have that dialogue of like, hey, like, you hired me to take the reins and do my job. To do that, I need the reins. Like, I really need you to trust me because you hired me. And for me, that might be a situation where we don't need to be going into protocols because that's what they've been doing. We need to go into a place of getting some trust and getting some consistency within that trust. And even like with regard to like gut protocols and things like that, it's like I see people almost digging themselves into ditches with all the protocols that they have done. And we honestly just need a mental break because some of these clients, they don't even know how to eat, like off of a meal plan. They don't know how to actually make food selections anymore. But that's a major coaching thing that we have to coach them through because there's a lot of fear. They're going to be kind of hyper vigilant with regard to any symptom. So any symptom that's changing, it's going to be kind of like emergency, DEFCON, you know, should I experience, you know, water retention, eating blueberries? I haven't had blueberries in 3 months. Like, it can really be hypersensitive reactions, and just talking them through those things and getting them to have some kind of choices within their life and saying, hey, you know, some of these things are normal. You know, even with regard to looking at like bowel movements and things, like, you know, you're not going to have a Bristol stool chart bowel movement that's absolutely perfect every single day.
And especially not with everything they've been through. So, you know, when we are literally, we're dumbing down the process is what we're doing. We're dumbing it down to a point where it's like the idea of walking before you run, you know, crawling before you walk. That's literally what it is, because at the end of the day, like a lot of these people they're so far into the weeds that they've totally forgot about executing basic tenets, you know? So.
Oh yeah. But some people don't even, I feel like they don't know how anymore, because they haven't for so long, because they have followed something. And so just like basic, like thinking skills of, you know, what can they eat? Like I have clients that are like, well, what am I allowed to eat? Like what, and it's just quite a nurturing conversation that we have to have with them, because everything is kind of very fear-based.
Yeah, and there's varying degrees of this. I mean, I've seen it as extreme as literally just people eating the same 4 foods for a million years, and then they can't, like, even the idea of interchanging a protein source, like a lean meat protein source, is terrifying. Like, that's an extreme example. Like, it can't, that to a normal person, they're like, okay, turkey, chicken, awesome, cool, whatever, right? Pork tenderloin, I don't know, like what, lean steak, like I don't know. So it's not, but for some people they are, like you said, they're so hyper vigilant that any little change is, you know, red alert. Everything's going to crumble.
It's life shaking.
So that trickles down into everything. So that trickles down into that blood glucose that they're tracking, that heart rate, that body weight, those pictures, that symptom, this symptom, that symptom. So sometimes for us, it's like I'm just like, fucking throw this way, and
absolutely.
And I'll tell people, those people up front, I'm generally having a conversation that along the lines of, you know how to do all of these difficult things. No problem. This is fine. I'm about to make you uncomfortable. Just, I'm letting you know, like, we're about to get uncomfortable. You're not uncomfortable currently. You feel bad, but psychologically, this is kind of where you thrive. So I'm about to take your firstborn child away from you. Okay? Whatever that might be. Your glucometer, yeah, I'm going to run it over with the car, and then I'm going to back over it again. Right?
Yeah. I think that's really interesting what you said, that as far as like, I'm getting ready to make you uncomfortable, even though they're very uncomfortable where they're at. They're in a different way. They're actually extremely comfortable being uncomfortable because it's so familiar. And so when we take them out of that or try to steer the ship into a more livable place, that is extremely scary.
And, you know, I get questions like, well, how long will this last? I'm like, it can be pretty short if you just let it happen, right? This can be a pretty short-term thing. We can figure out, you know, we can dumb this down, we can simplify, we can use a very elementary approach, get your routine in place, but I'm going to have to see consistency with it. It's not like, you're not going to fool me. You're not going to give me one good week where you're bullshitting all your feedback and telling me you're fine. I'm like, no, you're not. And then I'm not going to like throw you right back in. But on the same, you know, on the flip side of that, this is probably the type of thing that really dictates the length of the healing process more so than how long a protocol is. If someone's like, how long does it take to fix SIBO? I'm like, well, how long is it going to take you to get your shit together before we can run SIBO protocol?
Yeah.
I'm like,
that actually
well, the SIBO protocol might, right. I'm like, that might be 12 weeks or whatever the protocol ends up being, but it might take you 3 times that long before you're even ready for it. Like, well, what does that mean?
Yeah. That is the thing. And that, you know what, like, Austin, like, that is the thing that you are about, I'm about, but what leads to that protocol burnout is when people are not addressing like those base level things, and they're like, oh, this client has put a title on it, SIBO, dysbiosis, you know, adrenal fatigue, you know, things like that. They're like, oh, this is what the client has. I'm going to throw them these supplements. I'm going to tell them this is what they need to do, but they're not actually addressing the things within that person's life that led them into that situation. And we are not psychologists. We are not mental health experts. But by God, I think it's really important that it is our jobs as coaches to recognize when perhaps, you know what, maybe this person does need a referral. Maybe we need to have those discussions with someone that says, hey, listen, like, you have these goals. We really want, you know, obviously reoccurrence not to happen, although it is very possible even if you're doing all the right things. But we need to address these lifestyle pieces that led your body to be in the place that it's in.
I had someone ask me the other day, this was just an Instagram DM, and they were asking some general questions about functional health and stuff, and then they asked, and I could tell that they followed a lot of people that were putting out information, but they really didn't grasp like what it was going to take for them to heal, right? They knew what SIBO was, and they knew what estrogen dominance was, and like all these things, and then they asked me, well, if I do this, would I ever be able to lose weight again, or would I always need semaglutide? That's what they asked me. Or would I always need this, or would I always need that? And I'm like, oh no. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay.
That would be a no protocol client right there.
Yeah, because that's what they wanted. They wanted to see if my protocol was better than Joe's or Bob's protocol. Yeah.
The thing.
I'm going to tell you guys, I don't have the thing. Okay? I have the thing, but not the thing you're looking for. I've got something else that can help you heal, but it's not, you know, it's not a supplement protocol.
It's honestly, like, like silly and nerdy as it sounds, it's like honestly looking within and looking at your history, looking at what you're doing and taking responsibility. And it's not, I think a lot of people, Austin, they get scared that they need to, sacrifice their values and, their morals and change into somebody that they're not. It's not about that, but this may be an opportune time to do some audits within our life and see what really is serving. And, I know for myself, like full transparency, I have tried to create a lot more space for myself lately, an absolute lot more space. I needed just again, like just mental ease. And I recognize that. And so it was my responsibility to take that because there's no one else out there that's going to give me that. Right. And if I didn't listen, what would the result be?
And no one else, no one else knows what you need. So when we're talking about like us as coaches, and our mental health, if we need space or whatever it is, we're the only ones that can decide that. Like you guys are going to keep coming at us, it's not. So, and that's fine. That's not anyone's fault. But nobody really knows unless we're doing that on our own. Nobody really knows that, for all you know, we're fine and dandy and we could be treading water over here.
I think that comes back to that audit piece. And, there's no shame in saying, hey, listen, I got a little too much going on in life. I need to tone it down. But I think everybody is so scared to turn things down or maybe change the temperature of things within their life, that they're failing in some capacity, that they're going to miss out. They're not going to be, doing all the things that somebody else is doing. So thus they're not going to be achieving it all. They're not working towards their goals because they're not, crushing it.
I even get guilty of that sometimes too. That's why I don't pay much attention to social media because I really don't want to know what anyone else is doing.
I'm a social ninja now. I get on, post my things, run away, and all notifications are off. And this is nothing, I want to say this too. This is again, me realizing where like my headspace goes. And for me right now, like, I just know that, you know what? It's not serving to me right now. Nothing against social media. I've met like bestest friends here. Like I stalked Austin on here.
Yeah. I just tell people if I'm like, subscribe to the things that you want. That's a good feature to use. Subscribe and then don't pay attention to anything else. But
yeah, exactly.
Cool. Yeah, I think honestly that the ideas of self-awareness and ownership and protocol burnout and hypervigilance and all these things, I think those are probably the underlying issues for the vast majority of people that are struggling. So another note we can kind of throw on the end of that is if you are that person, and even if you don't have much self-awareness, if you're that person to an extent. Most people have at least an just a little bit in them somewhere that's like they kind of know it, right? Just make sure that if you are hiring someone that they value those things, right? It still boils down to you as the client at the end of the day, because you have this preconceived bias and you can freaking coach shop all day long and find what you want.
Oh yeah, somebody will take your money, no problem. And they'll put you on a protocol, easy peasy. They'll tell you what you want to hear, but not everybody is willing to tell you what you need to hear. I know that Austin's very open. I'm very open. I have been on consult calls and I have said to people that, listen, I want to help you. I know that I can help you, but you have to know that, for this really.
Did you see my post about trust the other day? Or no, I didn't. Not a post. It was a podcast I did with Kenneth, my client Kenneth and Laura. Yeah. They do a podcast. They're super cool. You'll enjoy it. So one of the things I said in there is trust. If you are hiring a coach, because we were talking about how to be a better client, how to be the best client you can. So Good one, guys.
Yeah.
Go listen to it. I may be biased,
Yeah.
but one of the things I said was trust is something that you should already have. It's not something that the coaches should have to like pry out of you for months on end to earn. I understand like a lot of people subscribe to that idea of like trust is earned, but yeah, they do earn your trust through things like testimonials, things like initial communication with you, things like their reputation, things like their whatever. But don't go in and with this like challenge mode on and think that it's going to work, because it's not. That's never going to end well. That relationship never pans out.
Yeah.
I straight up
anything,
said
even
it
beyond
in the
coaching.
podcast. I'm like, if you don't trust me, don't hire me, or at least don't hire me yet.
Yeah.
Hire me later.
Yeah.
Maybe
Exactly.
hire me in 2 weeks or a month or 6 months or whatever it might be. You know, ask somebody. Hell, I'll give you. You can talk to my clients. Like, I don't care. Whatever, do whatever. But you know, I'm not
Yeah.
going to try to convince you for months on end that you need to trust me.
And you know, the other part of that is not convincing. We don't need to convince you to trust me, and we definitely don't need to convince you that you need, you know, coaching. Like, that is why you have reached out, right?
Correct.
I think that's really important. Is
Yeah,
it's your choice.
It's a good little ending note there. But I appreciate you coming on. No, good.
Yeah,
That's good.
always
I
a good time.
will tag you, repost, all that good stuff. Cool.
Yeah, and I'll do this.
All right. I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Cool.
We'll see you.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.